Welcome. I'm really glad you're here. Truly. Whether you're joining live or watching the replay, I want to start by acknowledging something important. People don't end up in conversations like this by accident. You're here because you feel a pull, a quiet, persistent knowing that something about the way we grow food and relate to the land needs to change. A pull toward food security, toward resilience, toward working with the land instead of constantly pushing against it. Many of you feel this pull not out of fear, but out of responsibility. A responsibility to your household, your community, and to the land itself. And perhaps you've noticed this feeling has become stronger over the past few years. Weather that no longer behaves the way it used to. Gardens that struggle in ways they didn't before. Heat, drought, flooding, late frosts, unpredictable seasons, food prices rising, quality declining, supply chains feeling more fragile. What I want you to know right away is this. These challenges are not signs that growing food at home is impossible. They are signs that the old ways of doing it no longer works. And that brings us to what today is really about. The climate-smart ecological design blueprint, a system I've designed to help you thrive in these difficult times. Today is not about gardening tips. It's not about plant lists or quick fixes. It's not about learning one more trick to keep a struggling garden alive. Today is about learning how to think like an ecosystem designer. Because when you understand how ecosystems actually function, how water moves, how soil builds, how plants cooperate, how microbes form, how resilience is created, everything changes. By the end of this session, you'll understand why so many well-intentioned food gardens fail, why climate extremes are exposing weak design, not bad luck, and how ordinary properties, even small urban ones, can become extraordinarily productive when they are designed as living systems. Most people assume that failure comes from lack of experience. But in my work, I've seen something very different. Failure comes from design blindness. Planting without understanding water flow. Choosing plants without understanding microclimate. Adding inputs instead of building systems. Treating soil like a product instead of like a living organism. When landscapes are assembled piece by piece, season by season, reaction by reaction, they remain fragile. But when landscapes are designed as ecosystems, they begin to adapt. They begin to buffer heat. They begin to store water. They begin to build fertility on their own. They begin to require less work over time, not more. This is not a theory. This is observable, repeatable ecology. And it works whether you're on a suburban lot or multiple acres. Before we go any further, I want to introduce Lynn's Earth Gardening Academy, the organization I've started to help gardeners follow a more environmentally friendly path as they garden, whether growing indoors or on balconies and patios, in a small backyard, or taking the leap into life in the food forest. For the past 14 years, I've stewarded my own urban food forest. It began as sand. Now it produces fruit, vegetables, herbs, jams, preserves, and full freezers and pantries. During the past 2 summers, when heat domes shattered records, that landscape stayed cooler, more hydrated, and more resilient than the surrounding environment. That didn't happen because I worked harder. It happened because the system was designed correctly. What I'm sharing with you comes from a life of observation. My intention for this session is simple, to give you a new lens, to help you see your land differently, to help you understand what is already possible right where you are. And if by the end of our program together you find yourself thinking, I can do this, I understand this, I want to build something that lasts, then you're exactly where you need to be. Let's begin. My name is Lynn, and I've spent over 50 years studying, researching, teaching, and most importantly, living inside food systems. I didn't arrive at this work through a trend or weekend course. I arrived through decades of observation, failure, refinement, listening, and long-term stewardship. I've studied horticulture, farming systems, and permaculture for more than 5 decades, long enough to see ideas rise, fall, get rebranded, and sometimes disappear entirely. That length of time matters because ecosystems don't reveal their truth quickly. They reveal it over years and decades. I trained at places like the New Alchemy Institute and the Land Institute, institutions that shaped the early thinking around ecological design, closed-loop systems, and regenerative agriculture, long before these ideas became mainstream. These environments taught me something critical early on. If a system cannot sustain itself biologically, it will eventually fail, no matter how clever it looks on paper. Later, my academic path took me deeper into living systems. I completed PhD research on multi-layered indigenous gardens in Honduras, where I studied food systems that had been functioning successfully for generations, without external inputs, without chemical dependency, and without degrading their land. These gardens weren't accidental. They were designed ecosystems, built through observation, adaptation, and deep ecological intelligence. That research permanently changed how I understood food forests, not as a concept, not as an ideal, but as a practical, repeatable system that works across climates when designed correctly. Then I spent years working as an urban horticulture specialist for the New Mexico Cooperative Extension Service, where I saw firsthand what happens when people are given partial information instead of systems thinking. I watched well-intentioned gardeners struggle. I saw landscapes fail, not because people didn't care, but because no one had taught them how to read their land as a whole. And eventually, I brought all this knowledge home. Starting in 2012, I've designed and stewarded my own urban permaculture food forest. It sits in a hot, dry desert climate, a place many people can assume cannot support abundance. The land I began with wasn't rich, wasn't forgiving, it wasn't ideal. It was sand. And today, that same land produces fruit, vegetables, herbs, jams, preserves, and full freezers and pantry. But the most telling proof came recently, during the past 2 summers, when heat domes broke records across most of the country. My food forest behaved differently than the surrounding landscape. It stayed cooler. It held moisture. It protected itself. It continued producing. That didn't happen because I watered more. It didn't happen because I worked harder. It didn't happen because I used special products. It happened because the system was designed correctly. Water was held in the soil, not lost to evaporation. Shade was layered, not accidental. Soil biology was alive and functioning. Plants were supported by one another instead of competing. This is why this work matters, because climate extremes are not theoretical anymore. They're here. And they expose landscapes that were never designed for resilience. What I teach is not about growing food faster. It's about growing food wisely. It's about designing systems that cool themselves, hydrate themselves, regenerate themselves, and become more abundant as they mature. This work matters because it restores agency. It turns fear into confidence, turns overwhelm into clarity, and it proves something deeply important, that even in the most challenging environments, when we design with ecology instead of fighting it, the land responds. That's what I'm here to teach you, not theory, but what actually works over time. And everything you'll learn in this webinar comes from that lived reality. Most people believe their challenges with growing food come down to a familiar list. They say things like, I have bad soil. The weather here is impossible. The pests destroy everything. I don't have enough time. I don't have enough space. And on the surface, these explanations make sense. They're real experiences. They're frustrating, and they're incredibly common. But here's the truth I want to gently and clearly name. They are not the real problem. The real problem is something much deeper and much more fixable. The real problem is design blindness. Most landscapes are not designed, they are assembled. Plant by plant, season by season, reaction by reaction. Something dies, so we replace it. Something struggles, so we amend the soil. Something gets eaten, so we spray or fence. Something wilts, so we water more. This creates a cycle of constant response without understanding the system underneath. What's missing is not effort. What's missing is systems thinking. Very few people have ever been taught to design their landscape system by system, climate by climate, decade by decade. Instead of asking, what should I plant next, the better question is, what is this land already doing, and how do I work with it? Climate change has made this gap impossible to ignore, but it's important to understand something clearly. Climate change is not creating new problems. It's revealing weak design. Gardens that rely on constant inputs fail because inputs become unreliable. Gardens that ignore water flow fail because water is either lost or destructive. Gardens that don't build soil biology fail because fertility cannot be sustained. Gardens that don't plan for heat, frost, wind, or variability fail because stress accumulates faster than recovery. It's because they were taught the wrong framework. Traditional gardening models assume stable seasons, predictable rainfall, consistent temperatures, and infinite inputs. These assumptions no longer hold. And when these assumptions break, the system breaks with them. But here's what I want to offer. Ecosystems do not fail under change. Ecosystems adapt. They buffer extremes. They store water. They moderate temperature. They regenerate soil. They diversify risk. And they self-correct over time. And when we design our landscapes as ecosystems instead of collections of plants, something profound happens. The workload begins to decrease. The resilience begins to increase. The land begins to respond. Bad soil stops being a fixed problem because soil is built, not found. Bad weather stops being an enemy because microclimates buffer extremes. Pests stop being invaders because diversity restores balance. Limited time stops being a barrier because systems do the work for you. Limited space stops being a constraint because vertical and layered systems multiply yield. This is why I say that most people are not failing at gardening. They were simply never taught to design living systems. They were taught how to plant. They were not taught how to think ecologically. Once you see this, everything changes. You stop blaming yourself, you stop chasing products, you stop reacting, and you start designing. And this brings us to the heart of today's teaching, because when you learn how to read land as a system, when you design for climate instead of against it, when you build soil as an ecosystem instead of a substrate, you don't just grow food, you create a landscape that matures into abundance. This is the shift we're making today, and this is where the climate-smart ecosystem design blueprint begins. What I'm about to share with you now is the core of everything I teach. It's the framework that ties together decades of research, observation, indigenous ecological intelligence, and lived experience on the land. I call it the climate-smart ecosystem design blueprint. This is the same method I use to transform desert sand into fertile soil and abundance, and the same method that allowed my landscape to stay productive, cool, and resilient through extreme heat, drought, and unpredictability. It's not a collection of tips. It's not a trend. It's a way of thinking. And once you understand it, you can apply it anywhere. The blueprint rests on 4 non-negotiable pillars. These pillars are universal. They apply whether you're working with a backyard or acreage. Pillar 1 is read the land before you touch it. Every successful food forest begins with observation. Not planting, not digging, not buying plants. Observation. Before you change the land, you must understand what it's already doing. This means learning to read sun paths, how light moves across the site through the seasons. Wind corridors, where air accelerates, stagnates, or shelters. Water movement, where it flows, pools, infiltrates, or erodes. Soil texture, sand, silt, clay, compaction, organic matter. Microclimates, warm pockets, cold sinks, shaded zones, heat traps. Designing begins before planting because once you understand these patterns, the land starts telling you where things want to grow. When you read the land, mistakes disappear, inputs decrease, resilience increases. Every successful ecosystem starts with listening. When people skip this step, they end up fighting their site forever. When they honor it, the land becomes a partner. Pillar 2 is designed for climate reality, not climate ideals. The second pillar is about honesty. We did not design for how we wish the climate behaved. We designed for how it actually behaves and how it's changing. The climate is getting warmer in most places, cooler in a few, wetter in some, and drier in others. This means designing for heat waves, drought, intense rainfall, shifting frost patterns, and most of all, unpredictability. Climate-smart design doesn't mean fragility with backup plans. It means resilience built into the structure of the system. In practice, this looks like layering shade to reduce heat stress, storing water in soil instead of losing it to runoff or evaporation, buffering temperature through vegetation and mulch, reducing exposure to wind, frost, and sun extremes. When climate resilience is designed from the beginning, the system adapts instead of collapses. Pillar 3 is build in layered guilds, not rows. Nature never plants in straight lines. Rows are a human convenience. Guilds are ecological intelligence. Food forests rely on layers working together: canopy trees, understory trees, shrubs, herbaceous plants, ground covers, root crops, vines, and fungal and microbial networks. Each plant serves a function. Each plant supports the others. Some plants shade, some fix nitrogen, some accumulate minerals, some suppress weeds, some attract pollinators, some feed the soil. This is how work decreases over time. When systems are layered correctly, they become self-supporting, and your role shifts from constant labor to informed stewardship. Pillar 4, the soil is the engine. Food for every living thing starts with plants, and plants are supported by the soil. Soil is not dirt. Soil is a living ecosystem. Healthy soil holds water, moderates temperatures, feeds plants, resists disease, and supports microbial life. When soil biology is right, everything else becomes easier. Plants root deeper, water stays longer, stress decreases, pressure drops. When soil is treated as the engine, not an afterthought, abundance becomes inevitable. These pillars come together to form an ever-improving ecosystem. Let me ground this in reality, because it's one thing to talk about principles, frameworks, and blueprints in the abstract, and it's another thing entirely to live inside a system long enough to see whether it actually holds up, whether it survives heat, whether it survives drought, whether it survives neglect, mistakes, and changing conditions, whether it continues to give more than it takes. My own food forest, as I've said, exists in a hot, dry desert climate, the kind of place most people assume cannot support abundance without constant irrigation, constant amendments, constant intervention, the kind of place where people say nothing grows here. When I began, the soil was not rich. It was not forgiving. It was not biologically active. It was sand, loose, mineral-heavy, organic matter-poor desert sand that shed water, heated quickly, and supported very little life. This is my soil in 2012. By 2015, it had organic matter in it. And by 2022, it was richly aggregated, highly organic, and very fertile. What exists now is not the result of luck. It is not the result of special products. It's not the result of endless labor. It's the result of design. One of the first things people notice when they step into my food forest is the temperature difference. Even during extreme heat, including the record-breaking heat domes of the last 2 summers, the ground inside the system stays noticeably cooler than the surrounding landscape. Not by a little, but by a lot. You can feel it immediately underfoot. That cooling happens because mulch and fungal systems are working together as a living infrastructure. Thick organic mulch feeds fungal networks. Those fungal networks bind soil particles into aggregates. Those aggregates hold water deep in the soil profile. And water held in soil is one of the most powerful temperature buffers on Earth. So the soil doesn't heat as quickly. Roots don't cook. Microbes don't collapse. Plants don't shut down. This isn't about watering more often. It's about designing soil that retains what it receives. When soil biology is functioning, every inch of rain, every drop of irrigation, every bit of humidity becomes part of a larger system, not a fleeting event that evaporates or runs away. If you're in a place that gets too much rain, then encouraging it to infiltrate into the soil is good for you too, because it prevents erosion and helps your plants root more deeply. Then there's shade, not accidental shade, not the kind that blocks everything and creates stagnation. Layered shade, varied shade. Tall canopy plants filter the harshest sun. Sub-canopy plants soften light further. Shrubs break wind and protect trunks. Ground covers protect the soil surface itself. Every layer does something different. Together, they reduce heat, slow air movement, limit evaporation, and moderate temperature swings. The result is a self-generated microclimate. Ground temperatures drop dramatically. Humidity stays higher where plants actually need it. Leaves transpire without stress. Flowers hold longer. Fruit develops more evenly. This is not about hiding plants from the sun. It's about designing the right light quality for long-term productivity. Water behaves differently too. Instead of running off, it infiltrates. Instead of pooling destructively, it spreads. Instead of evaporating quickly, it sinks and stays. That's because water flow was designed intentionally. The land was shaped, sometimes subtly, sometimes deliberately, so that water is invited into soil rather than allowed to escape. Where conventional landscapes shed water as quickly as possible, this one captures it. Where erosion would normally occur, organic matter accumulates. Where fertility would normally be lost, it builds. This isn't complicated technology, it's ancient hydrology applied intelligently. Water is not treated as an enemy or a scarce resource to be controlled. It's treated as a collaborator. Pests behave differently in this system too, not because pests disappear, they don't, but because they no longer dominate. In a landscape built on diversity, pests are just one voice in a much larger conversation. Guilds, layered plant communities, create balance. Some plants repel insects chemically. Some confuse pests virtually or aromatically. Some attract predators. Some provide habitat for beneficial insects. Some act as decoys. Instead of monoculture that invites explosion, you have ecosystems that resist imbalance. There's no chemical warfare here. No panic spraying, no constant intervention, just relationships doing what relationships do best, regulating. And perhaps most importantly, harvests arrive across seasons, not all at once, not in one overwhelming glut followed by scarcity, but steadily, fruit at different times, greens appearing when others fade, roots waiting quietly underground, herbs producing for months at a time, preserves filling shelves gradually, freezers filling intentionally, pantries becoming stocked without urgency. This rhythm matters. It means abundance is livable. It means food integrates into life instead of overwhelming it. Let me be clear about something important. This is not survivalism. Survivalism is reactive, scarcity-driven, fear-based. This work is proactive, abundance-oriented, rooted in trust, in systems, in ecology, in time. It's the difference between constantly fighting collapse and deliberately building systems that want to function. And here's what matters most. This approach works. It works in cities. It works in suburbs. It works in backyards. It works on acreage because ecosystems scale. The same principles that govern a forest apply to a courtyard. The same water logic applies to a slope or a raised bed. The same soil biology operates whether you have 10 square feet or 10 acres. What changes is size, not function. This is what this looks like in real life. Not a perfect garden, but a living landscape that improves over time. A system that feeds you, cools you, protects you, and responds intelligently to change. A place where soil deepens instead of depleting. Water stays instead of escaping. Plants cooperate instead of competing. Abundance increases instead of collapsing. This is what becomes possible when we stop asking, what can I grow here? And start asking, what kind of ecosystem wants to exist here? This question changes everything. And that is the work we're stepping into together. This is the framework we'll be working on throughout the journey. And this is the foundation of everything that comes next. At a certain point, this work stops being about plants. It becomes about who you are becoming. Life in the food forest is not everyone, and that's intentional. It's not for people looking for quick fixes. It's not for people who want a checklist without responsibility. It's not for people who want nature to obey them. This work calls for a very special kind of person. And if you're here, chances are you already feel it. This work is for stewards. Stewards are people who don't just own land, they listen to it. They walk slowly. They notice where water pools. They pay attention to how the sun moves. They see patterns forming before problems appear. A steward understands that land is not inert. It's alive. It's communicating all the time. This course teaches you how to hear that language and how to respond with care, intelligence, and humility. This work is for protectors. Protectors understand that climate stress is no longer abstract. Heat waves, drought, unpredictable frost, sudden deluges. Protectors don't panic. They design. They buffer heat with shade. They store water in soil. They reduce exposure instead of fighting symptoms. They build systems that absorb shock instead of collapsing under it. If you feel a responsibility, not just to your plants, but to your home, your family, and the living system around you, this work is for you. This work is for providers. Not in a scarcity-driven way, not in a survivalist way, but in a grounded, rooted way. Providers take quiet pride in knowing their land contributes, that their yard produces nourishment, that their freezer and pantry are filling, not by chance, but by design. Providers don't outsource all resilience. They cultivate it at home. If you feel the deep satisfaction of harvesting something you grew, if you want your land to participate in feeding your household, if you want to reduce dependence without increasing stress, this work meets you there. This work is for ecological visionaries. Visionaries think beyond seasons, beyond trends, beyond themselves. They understand that what we plant now shapes landscapes for years to come. They know that every decision is a vote for a future reality. Ecological visionaries don't ask, what's easiest right now? They ask, what will still be working in 10, 20, 30 years? If you find yourself thinking in systems, if you care about regeneration, not just production, if you want your land to heal instead of extract, you are exactly who this work was built for. And finally, this work is for legacy builders. Legacy builders plant trees they may never sit between. They design systems that outlive them. They think about what they leave behind, not just materially, but ecologically. Legacy builders understand that the land remembers. And they want that memory to be one of care, fertility, and resilience. This isn't about perfection. It's about responsibility. It's about choosing to participate consciously in the living world. If you feel called to leave your land better than you found it, if you want future generations to inherit abundance instead of depletion, then this path is already yours. Life in the food forest is not just a course. It's a way of seeing, a way of designing, a way of belonging again to land, to season, to life itself. And if something in you is quietly nodding right now, you're exactly where you need to be. Now, here's the truth, and I want to say this clearly and respectfully. Understanding the climate-smart ecosystem design blueprint conceptually is powerful. For many people, this is the first time the pieces have clicked, the first time they've seen why things haven't worked, the first time food, soil, water, climate, and design have come together into a coherent system. And that alone can be deeply validating. But there's an important difference between understanding a framework and implementing it well. Designing living systems isn't something you do once and walk away from. It unfolds over time. It responds to seasons. It adapts to your specific land. It asks different questions at different stages. And this is where most people, even intelligent, motivated, deeply committed people, get stuck. They know what they want. They understand the principles, but they're left asking, where do I start on my actual property? What comes first? Soil, trees, water layout? How do I adapt this to my climate instead of copying someone else's system? How do I avoid expensive, exhausting mistakes? How do I know if what I'm doing is right or quietly undermining the system? This is not a failure of will. It's a lack of structured guidance because ecosystems are forgiving, but design mistakes compound, and early decisions shape everything that comes afterwards. That's why I created Life in the Food Forest, not as a course full of information, but as a guided design journey, a place where we take the blueprint and apply it to your climate, to your soil, to your property, at the right pace, in the right order. In this program, you're not guessing. You're not piecing together advice from dozens of sources. You're not reacting season by season. You're learning how to think like an ecosystem designer, and then doing the work with support. Week by week, we move through observation before action, design before planting, systems before species, resilience before productivity. You don't have to know everything. You don't have to get it perfect. You just need a clear framework and a steady hand guiding the process. That's what this container provides. And perhaps most importantly, you're not doing this alone. You're designing alongside others who feel the same pull towards stewardship, resilience, and legacy. People who understand that this work isn't about control, it's about relationship. So if, as you've been listening today, you felt quiet recognition, a sense, this is the way I want to work with the land, then the next step isn't more information. It's supported implementation, and that's the invitation I'm about to extend. Not to buy something, but to step into a guided process, one that turns understanding into living systems, that grow with you for decades to come. Let me show you what that looks like. Now I want to shift gears a little bit. Up to this point, everything we've talked about has been about understanding, seeing differently, recognizing patterns, reframing what's actually happening on the land. And that understanding matters. Understanding the climate-smart ecosystem design blueprint gives you a new lens. It helps you see why things have struggled, why certain efforts never seem to pay off, why some landscapes demand constant effort while others seem to support themselves. But here's the honest truth. I want to say this with clarity and respect. Understanding the blueprint conceptually is powerful. Implementing it correctly is where most people need guidance. Not because they aren't capable, not because they aren't intelligent, not because they aren't committed, but because ecological design is layered, sequential, and context-specific. It's not one decision, it's hundreds of small interrelated decisions, each one influencing the next. Where to begin, what to observe first, what to leave alone, what to change, what timing matters, what can wait, what absolutely cannot. This is where people often get stuck. They understand what they want to create, but they don't know how to move through the process without second-guessing every step. And this is exactly why I created Life in the Food Forest. Life in the Food Forest is not a collection of lessons. It's not a self-paced video library where you're left to interpret complex ideas on your own. It's a 10-week live guided design experience where I walk you step by step through the process of designing your food forest correctly for your land, your climate, and your life. Week by week, we move through the blueprint together, not rushing, not skipping foundations, not layering complexity before the base is solid. This is slow work done correctly, so it becomes easy work later. Inside the course, you'll learn how to read the land deeply before you ever plant, Map sun, wind, water, slope, soil, and microclimates. Understand what your climate is actually doing, not what it used to do or you want it to do. Design for heat, drought, frost shifts, and variability. Select plants that belong in your ecosystem. Build layered gills that support themselves. Plant trees and perennials correctly so they thrive long term. Troubleshoot soil, pest, and stress issues with confidence, and design a system that matures into abundance over time. This is not about getting it perfect. This is about getting the structure right, so the system can grow wiser every year. We meet live once a week for 10 weeks. Each session is 2 hours, with teaching, demonstration, and open Q&A. That live component matters because design questions are specific. Your land is not generic. Your challenges are not theoretical. And you are never left wondering, am I doing this right? You can ask. You can show your map. You can get feedback. You can adjust in real time. And if you can't attend live, you have lifetime access to every recording. This is a course you can return to as your land evolves year after year. And a certificate of completion recognizing that you have completed your training. This isn't just education. It's infrastructure for decision making. So you're not starting from scratch every season. Life in the food forest is for people who feel something deeper than curiosity. It's for those who feel responsibility to their land, to their household, to the future. It's for people becoming stewards, those who read the land carefully instead of impressing ideas upon it. Protectors, those who design against climate stress instead of reacting to it. Providers, those whose land meaningfully feeds their household. Ecological visionaries, those thinking beyond one season or one yield. Legacy builders, those planting systems that will outlive them. You don't need experience, you don't need acreage, you don't need perfect soil. You need willingness and guidance. I do want to speak plainly about timing. Designing now matters because ecological systems operate on seasonal rhythm. Design done in winter shapes planting in spring. Planting done early establishes deeper roots. Roots established early buffer heat and drought later. Waiting doesn't just delay progress. It delays the entire maturation time of your ecosystem. 1 year of waiting becomes 5 years of difference down the line. Starting now means your soil biology begins building sooner. Your trees establish earlier. Your microclimates develop faster. Your resilience increases before the next stress cycle. Your system has time to mature into stability. This is not urgency based on fear. This is alignment with ecological times. I also want to acknowledge something. Choosing not to act is still a choice, and it has a cost. Not a dramatic one, not an immediate one, but a quiet one. Another season of trial and error, another year of plants that struggle, another summer of heat stress, another round of buying inputs, another missed harvest, another moment thinking, I should really figure this out. Doing nothing keeps you exactly where you are. Designing changes the trajectory. Life in the Food Forest is offered in 2 enrollment tiers. Early bird enrollment is $997, and regular enrollment is $1,497. Early bird pricing is only available for a limited time and is not returned once it closes. There are payment plans available because access matters. This is an investment, yes, but it's an investment that returns food, resilience, security, knowledge, confidence, and a system that reduces cost over time. And I want to speak about the guarantee because it reflects how I teach. You are protected by a 14-day caring commitment guarantee. If after the first 2 sessions you feel overwhelmed, uncertain, or simply not aligned, you can request a full refund. No friction, no interrogation, no pressure. This course is not about convincing, it's about alignment. I only want you to have this if it genuinely resonates. I want to leave you with this. Your land is already responding to you. It responds to how water moves, how soil is treated, how plants are arranged, to how stress is buffered or amplified. Right now, it's waiting for clarity, for design, for stewardship. You don't need more tips. You don't need more products. You don't need to try harder. You need a system that works with climate reality, a system that matures instead of depletes, a system that feeds you while healing the land beneath your feet. So if you're ready to build something that feeds your household and regenerates your soil, adapts to climate extremes, and becomes a living legacy, I would be honored to guide you. Thank you truly for being here. Thank you for your attention, your curiosity, your care for the land. And thank you for choosing to live in relationship with the ecosystems that sustain us. Click on the link here to enroll in Life in the Food Forest. We're here to welcome you.